I was at your amazing event the other night, which was just so inspiring to see the big turnout. And anytime I hear uh, "Keep Marching," I
Yes,
cry.
no. I mean,
Yeah.
that chain of Taub is incredible.
Oh,
I loved especially seeing like the girls in that front row mouthing the words and singing
I
along. It was pretty great.
know it was beautiful. So we're here, and I'm recording this because I know it's at 4 o'clock, and some teachers are. We actually have parent conferences in like 30 minutes.
Ah,
So I'm recording this, and then teachers can watch it later. But
super.
I was saying to people as I went live, like what happens, not to be New York City centric, but what happens in this New York City race and who becomes our next mayor, obviously is going to affect people who live in New York City, but the way things are going right now with what's going on with the federal government, New York City and who is our next mayor is so important. What we're going to focus on in the beginning of this conversation is your education plan. And as a New York City public school teacher for the past 23 years, I'm super interested in what your plan is. Now, one thing I wanted you to explain to people, and it's something that I have trouble explaining, even though I've been in the system for so long, is New York City has something called mayoral control of the Department of Ed. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, well, it's worth going back because what was before mayoral control was that there was a New York City Board of Education but the funny thing was, it wasn't really democratically elected. It was appointed by a bunch of random other politicians, and then that board chose the chancellor.
Oh,
And so there was a real lack of accountability in the system.
I see.
There are places with elected boards, and I think people find that can be nice that there's, some democracy, but a real lack of accountability because, you don't know who those people are, and then they hire, a chancellor or a superintendent. But here it was sort of the worst of all worlds
Yeah.
because it was not elected. It was just appointed by a bunch of different politicians, and no one was accountable. So when Mike Bloomberg was mayor, he went to Albany and said, let's change the system so that the mayor appoints the chancellor. And I believe that makes a lot of sense. Like it's
Yeah.
good to have a direct line of accountability. But then he also said the thing that used to be the Board of Education will turn into a panel for educational policy, and the mayor will also appoint the majority of that board. And that's supposed to be the vehicle where parents, students, educators can get their voices heard. And it has not been
Yes.
that because it's essentially a mayoral rubber stamp body. So what I want to do is keep it so that the mayor appoints the chancellor. I
Okay.
think it's important that there's a straight line of accountability. I will bring my nominee for chancellor to the city council for their
Oh,
advice and consent
that's great.
because the public should see a real back and forth. I'm going to appoint an educator, somebody who was in the
Thank you.
classroom, who was a
Thank
principal,
you.
who was a superintendent,
Thank you.
who's, yeah, no, I mean, that kind of should go without saying.
Right.
Um, but it doesn't, and it won't be like a crony or a political appointee. The council will get to have advice and consent. And then I want to reboot how we have the panel for educational policy, the community education councils, where I don't know
Mhm.
if you saw, but there was just an
Yeah.
election, but it's long been the case that only like 2% of people vote. And it really is not a system that is maximizing parent, educator, and student voices. And then,
Yes.
of course, at each school, you've got a school leadership team that is supposed to be the real place where kind of parents, educators, the principal, and the staff in the school do the work together. So I want to reboot. I think sometimes I don't know that it's the best thing to call it, but I sometimes call
No.
what I want municipal control. Like
Oh,
New York
I like that.
City should control its schools.
Yeah.
The mayor can appoint the chancellor, but we need a lot more involvement from
Yes.
educators, parents, and especially in the high school, students themselves
Yes.
to be working together behind a shared vision for how their school delivers for all its kids.
That's so important. And I've been advocating for that for a long time. Just giving more teachers who are just in the classroom every day, a seat at the table. I know there is some, I'm not saying that doesn't exist at all right now, and students, because especially even when you get into middle school, definitely high school, they have really smart ideas for how to make the schools work better, and of course parents. So aside from all that, like, what would you say is at the heart of your education plan, and how that's going to change what New York City schools look
Yeah.
like if you become
Yeah.
mayor?
No, let's say when I become mayor,
When you
but
become
yes,
mayor.
I
Let's
like it.
manifest. When you become
Yeah,
mayor. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, so a few things. Step one is I really think one challenge in the schools is we have this kind of one size fits all idea that there's a certain average or median student, and everything kind of out from there is sort of a adjustment. And we're really seeing in our schools how that doesn't work right now. We've got a big growth in mental health issues, a big growth in chronic absenteeism, a big growth in homelessness. One in every 8 students was homeless some part of last year. So we need a lot more attention on those issues. That means assign staff whose job it is to go out to families where the kids have been absent a long time and figure out what gets them back. More guidance counselors and school social workers for kids to help deal with social and emotional learning. So that's one, like, and a real focus on students with IEPs and special needs and the resources. I was just at the Brooklyn Children's School the other day. They have this great motto. It's a District 15 school, but also a
Oh,
D75 school.
oh,
And every class is collaborative team teaching, is an inclusive ICT class. And it doesn't just meet the needs of kids with IEPs. I talked to one mom who has 2 kids in the school, and she said, honestly, I think the school might be doing, better this model for my kid without an IEP than the kid she has in the school with an IEP. What's really critical, there's a lot of different good models.
yeah, of
Like,
course.
that model is good. Dual language is good. Expeditionary learning is good. There's, international baccalaureate. There's plenty of models that you can get a school to cohere around,
Yeah.
but you've got to have it be that there's real alignment of vision and then support for all those different students. And so
Yeah.
that's one. Two is support, for teachers, is both
Mhm.
recruitment, retention, and support. And we're just not doing that well enough right now. So for recruitment, I want to make it so that for any CUNY student who comes and teaches in the New York City public schools for 5 years, your tuition is covered. It burns off over 5 years, and we could cover tuition.
That's
I've got a
amazing.
great model that would help double the price of a home that city workers could buy in the 5 boroughs by investing pension fund dollars. So let's say there's a teacher who could get a $350,000 mortgage, but there's no $350,000 homes to
No.
buy. The pension funds would match that with 350. Now you could buy a $700,000, co-op condo and or home, and you live there, it grows in value, you own your home. When you sell, you get half the proceeds, the other half goes back to the pension fund so that there's still enough money in the pension funds. But you'll be able to to own a home. So
Yeah.
anyway, so that is
That's
sort of
that's something that doesn't exist right now. It could definitely encourage more people
recruit,
to come here.
retain, and support. So for support, I was just in a school that's got one of these teacher centers, which I
Mhm.
really was impressed with. A dedicated space with an instructional coach and time in the school calendar to work with other teachers on, if there's some new curriculum like NYC Reads, but also
Mhm.
just to compare notes on, what's working with the students and what's not, help teachers think about their own professional development, move on to get the next, certification, something that could boost salary and improve teaching.
Oh yeah.
So that, those, seeing every student and supporting every teacher is really at the heart. And I even laid out in my plan, which hopefully a staff is on
Yeah, they
and
can.
can drop in the chat,
Yeah, please drop them in
what
the
the
chat.
framework I would use for evaluation is,
Oh, please tell me about that, because teacher evaluations have always been based on Well, tell me yours, and then I'm
Yeah.
curious to
I
hear
mean,
it.
this
Yeah.
is at the school level, because I think
Yes.
at the school level, what really, people obsess about test scores in reading and
Mhm.
math. And of course, we're going to keep doing reading and math tests, but there's all these other things that don't get factored into evaluation that are critical. I mentioned chronic absenteeism. So if you've
Yeah.
got that, you want to say, okay, what are we doing to go get those families back? And there's student social and emotional well-being and mental health issues, and there's some tools you can use to figure out, okay, how are we doing on those issues? There's things like, are we supporting the growth of our teachers?
Right.
So we use this framework we call the Framework for Great Public Schools. It builds from some research that the University of Chicago School Research Consortium did called the Five Essentials. And its features are, effective and rigorous teaching, social and emotional well-being
Mhm.
for students, involving community, and turning every school into more of a community school. And with each of those things, there's, material, there's data you can use to bring to the table.
Right.
And, the goal isn't so much to give a score. The goal is
Right.
to provide some clarity on how the school's doing in each of those areas,
Mhm.
and then provide support to the leadership and school community to figure out, okay, here's an area where we need to make some adjustments to do better, and then follow up and get that done.
I love that there's a focus on social emotional because that's so increasingly crucial, especially after the kids during the pandemic and coming out of that. So, in terms of, let's talk about the hot button issue that's both nationwide and also city level. That the charter
Yeah.
schools. What are your thoughts on the charter school system, funding, all of that?
Yeah. So look, I'm a neighborhood public school guy. I went
Yeah.
to a neighborhood public school. My mom was a lifelong guidance counselor in an elementary public school. And my kids both are pre-K to 12 in New York City public schools. So
Awesome.
that's what I care about. That's where my focus will be. That's where the resources I'm going to focus are. That's where my attention is going to go. I'm not going to I don't want to see an increase in the charter cap. I don't want to see an increase in the rate. New York City already pays quite a
Yes.
lot extra, like for space and for charters, more than any other locality
Yeah.
in the state. That said, I do think we can learn some things in community, and it
Mhm.
doesn't have to be hostile. It could be partnership. So my son, he works at Dream Academy, which is
Oh.
a network of charters in East Harlem and the South Bronx that were built out of this great organization, community group called Harlem RBI, after school sports and education program. And it's an amazing network of schools. They're able to do extended school day and extended school year for every kid. They provide 6 years of post graduation, college, and career support, and all the staff who do it are alum of the schools. And they have this great data team that my son is on that's able to give the teachers and the school community a lot of data on what's working and what's not working. So it's great they can do that.
Yeah.
And of course, we'd like for every school to be able to do extended school day, extended school year, post graduation, college, and career support, and have the data to support teachers. So I'd love to have that be something that is happening in many more of our neighborhood public schools, and compare notes on what's working. And I think that will help us, get past,
Yeah.
the ed wars.
Yes.
Um, but remember, it's funny, like I don't miss the ed wars, but at least we were talking about our schools. Right now, there's so little dialogue at the local or national level. I mean, I'm the only candidate in this race who's put out a plan for
Yeah.
how I would lead the public school system. And it's the biggest thing New York City does by far. It's
Yes.
more than a quarter of our budget and way more than a quarter of our future. So,
Yeah. No, that's so important. When I think about charter schools, one of the reasons I never left the same school that I've been at for 23 years for a charter school is I don't, there's a lot, I mean, I have some issues, but we don't have to get into that. But I think the one thing that I wouldn't have liked about it was the control they have over curriculum, right? A lot of these schools have prescribed curriculums, and there's a lot of freedom for the professional teachers to bring, we follow Regents curriculum, and I follow some College Board curriculum, but there is some flexibility in our daily lessons and how we teach our kids and the instruction, deliver instruction. That's the proper term, delivering instruction. I mean, talking about ed wars, I think unfortunately the ed wars are not about what's the best way to run the school. It's about ridiculous things in my mind, like book bans and DEI and all the stuff that's coming from the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And I know that as mayor of New York, you're going to be on the front lines like you were on Friday. I think it was Friday, defending the mayor, standing up for the mayor of Newark and demanding
Yeah.
that he was released from being detained for doing nothing wrong. How are you going to stand up to potential threats from the Trump administration about the teachers' curriculum?
Yeah.
The city's
This
curriculum.
is
Yeah.
this is so important, and it's really an area people just are not paying enough
Yeah.
attention to, in a few ways. So yes, first, I've been standing up to Trump because that's what New Yorkers expect. 75% of New Yorkers in a poll that came out yesterday want a mayor who's going to protect them from Donald Trump. So when Musk stole $80 million from New Yorkers a couple months ago, I found it, called it out, got us into court to get it back.
Thank you for
On
that.
congestion pricing, I'm leading that effort. Every week now, I do a presser showing what the impact of Trump policies is on New Yorkers. This week we focused on Medicaid and food stamps. Last week we did AmeriCorps. But education is critical. I mean, in every red state now, they are basically voucherizing and privatizing their schools and doing grave damage to public education. And Democrats have to take this issue back. I think before the pandemic, Democrats were the party of the public schools, and we showed we love them. Yes, we want new policies and support to hold accountable. We're always thinking about what can make them work better. But look, for starters, we believe in them, and they're the future of our democracy and our kids thriving, both as how they'll get good jobs, but also how they'll be full, well-rounded people and leaders. So we have to have mayors and governors in blue cities and states who lean in on that and fight against the voucherization, fight against the budget cuts, and then use state and city resources. Of the $30 billion school budget, about $2 billion is federal funding, and $2 billion is a lot of money. But on the other hand, that's less than 10% of our school budget.
Yeah.
So we're not going to be bullied by the Trump administration into changing that we put public education first.
Thank you.
And one thing that I would just worry about here is the candidate that's leading in the polls, Andrew Cuomo. He went on a podcast last week, and we got this question. He gave super weird answer where he said, I guess he was attacking Zohran Mamdani, the DSA candidate in the race, but he said there's all this far left socialism. People want free transportation, and he literally said free education.
No, he did not.
Though he literally did. As though Andrew
Wow.
Cuomo thinks that public education is some
free.
kind of socialism. But that's what happens if we get a mayor who's not willing to stand up and fight for our public schools. And it is going to be both a challenge to lead them well, but critical to have someone who will stand up to Trump and MAGA Republicans and put our public schools first.
Well, thank you so much for that. So let's kind of broaden our lens a bit now that you brought up that he's leading. We can change that, right?
Yes.
So as a teacher, I think it's really important every chance I get to explain to people in simple terms how ranked choice voting works.
Yeah.
And I know you and your whole team is doing an amazing job explaining it. Can you, in just a few sentences, explain to everyone watching and who will be watching later how this works and how they need to approach the ballot on June 23rd,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
June 24th is the election day.
Yeah.
Early voting will start on June 14th. And yes, so we have the system of ranked choice voting. And what that means is you can rank up to 5 candidates on your ballot. Number 1, you put the person you most want to be mayor. So hopefully you'll put Brad Lander number 1. and then the person you would prefer second and third and fourth and fifth. And you just rank. That's not so
No,
complicated,
no,
right? Just
no.
rank, what order you prefer the candidates. Don't put anyone on the ballot that you don't want to vote for mayor. So I would recommend not putting Andrew Cuomo anywhere on your ballot.
No.
And Eric Adams isn't even running in the Democratic primary, so you don't have to
Don't have to
worry
worry
about
about
him.
that. Don't have to worry about
Now,
that anymore.
a
Yeah.
way, there's a lot of ways to explain it. I like doing it like this. We used to have a runoff
Yes.
system where if no candidate got a majority, the top two candidates would then have a runoff a couple weeks later. And the problem was no one voted in the runoff. So this tries
Okay.
to kind of do the runoff without making you come back.
Oh,
So if
smart.
you
Yeah.
think like, okay, I'm voting for my top candidate number one, but let me imagine that, my top candidate doesn't make the runoff. I want to have in that runoff, I want to have the candidate I prefer on my ballot. So let's
Right.
just say you rank me one, you rank someone one, but that person isn't one of the two finalists. The person you rank second, if they are, you'd be voting for them. So if
I
you
see.
don't put Andrew Cuomo on your ballot, let's imagine that he's going to make the final round. Hopefully, I'll be in that final round with him. And if you put me on your ballot number one, then I'll be there. But if your number one candidate doesn't make the final round, but your number two candidate does, then great. You're voting for that number two candidate in that final round against.
That
So
makes
that's
sense.
how it works. And the strategy I think will be, yeah, like don't rank Andrew Cuomo and put hopefully Brad Lander first, and then Working Families Party has endorsed three other candidates: Adrian Adams, Zelnor Myrie, and Zoran Mamdani.
Hmm.
I know some people who like Jessica Ramos or Scott Stringer. Rank those folks 2 through 5 and keep an eye on which candidates look like they've got the best shot to get to
Hmm.
that final round against Cuomo, and make sure those candidates, and this will get a little clearer as the polling shakes out over the next 6 weeks,
Yeah.
make sure those candidates are on your ballot.
That's a great that makes sense. Okay, I'm gonna clip that part and just post it so everyone watches that. And I see one of my students is watching. Hi,
Oh,
Kadesh.
that's great.
So cute. I love it. Yay. I know. Like there's no boundary now because I'm so public
I
online, which is
love
great. They
talking to students. I've been doing, because I have this
oh
education
yeah,
plan. You do
yeah.
subways in the morning. Tonight, this morning, I was at a dog park, but
Oh
I've
awesome.
been going to school pickups,
Oh
and
cool.
kids have the best questions. Where they're just like, okay, so
Yeah.
why is there so much littering?
Yeah.
Can we get? Somebody asked me, can't we have trampolines in the public parks?
Can we? Can
So
we?
I think it's a
Don't you
great
say? Why
idea. I
not?
want to
It's good
find a way to do it.
exercise.
I
So
agree.
I love that idea actually. So I guess my other question is kind of another kind of overarching question, which is like, I always like to think about what my why is, especially the days when my students, love you all, are driving me insane because it's May and I
Yeah.
need to get them ready for the regents. And I always have to back up and say, what is my why? Why am I still doing this? So what is your why? Like what made you, I mean, you've been working as an organizer in city council, now you're a New York City comptroller. Why do you want to be mayor of New York? I know it seems like a really simple question, but
No, thank
sometimes the
you.
most simplest. What made you say, you know what? I want to be mayor of
Yeah.
New York.
No, well, thank you. I mean, I love that question. First, I love New York City. I mean, what it has been for me and my family and its institutions. I mean, the schools are the most important institutions in our lives. Like what was made possible for my two kids because they got a great education. And then when I think about the things that bring me joy, it's Prospect Park and it's First Saturday at the Brooklyn Museum. And
So
I
fun.
got this picture here my daughter did in school. This is Celebrate Brooklyn, the
Oh,
summer concerts
I
in
love that.
Prospect
She did
Park.
that? Wow.
So yeah, in an art class at her New York City Public High School.
That's awesome.
And so, we can, and it's so diverse and inclusive and makes possible this idea that wherever you're from, whatever neighborhood, whatever your background, we're invested in your chance to thrive, and we can turn that into cultural creativity and economic thriving and new businesses and beautiful human beings who are the leaders of the next generation. But right now, people are fed up because government is not doing
Yeah.
that, because the housing is so expensive. No one can think they can afford to live here because people don't feel safe on the subways because, we've let too many of our mentally ill neighbors be homeless, and people don't feel safe, and people feel like government is not there fighting for me and delivering for me. And, I hear that from teachers, and I hear that from young families, and I hear that just in every neighborhood. And I know we can do better. I've been proud as a housing organizer and community developer, as a city council member who got the Gowanus rezoning passed and helped integrate the middle schools of District 15,
Yeah.
as a controller who's helped save over $2.5 billion of taxpayer money and make our agencies run better. I know that we can support our teachers in our schools, make our public housing do right by its residents, invest in our libraries and parks and cultural institutions, expand after school and childcare for families, who need it, which is all
Yeah.
families. Build a lot more housing, and a lot more actually affordable housing. And the number one commitment I made in this race is to end street homelessness for people with serious mental
Right.
illness, because we don't have to be a city where a couple thousand of our mentally ill neighbors sleep on the subway platforms and sidewalks and stoops of our building. And when we do all those things, make city
Yeah.
government deliver for New Yorkers, we'll be in such a stronger position to stand up to Trump. I mean, with having Eric Adams like humiliate us in front of the world, we can flip that on its head, because if it's a city that has helped mentally ill homeless folks get off the streets, that has teachers feeling supported and school communities feeling stronger again, that's making progress on affordable housing, that'll just feel more like New York is New York, like we're winning, like the Knicks are doing at the Garden right now.
Yeah.
And that gives us the strength to say, hey, this model of a really diverse, inclusive place like New York City, that's how we stand up to Trump, not just by
Yes.
fighting him to get our money back, but by showing our values work better, and we are making them work better right here.
I love that so much. So I feel like there's going to be a bunch of people who watch later and say, okay, well, what is like? There's two things you mentioned, and then we'll wrap because I know you have other things to do. You mentioned the housing plan and like to making housing more affordable, and the plan to get the mentally ill unhoused people off the streets. How are we going to do that?
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
100% behind that. What's the plan though?
Yeah, so all the details are on the website at landerfornyc.com. So people who really want to see the education
Yeah.
plan can go there. It's a 75-page plan for ending street homelessness for people with serious mental
A
illness. The
75
main
page
thing there,
plan. That's
it's
amazing.
very
Yeah.
detailed because you need a
Yeah.
real continuum of care. But at its heart is a policy called Housing First that
Mm,
says, instead of pushing people to go into shelter, which a lot of people have had a bad experience in shelter, you take them straight from the street into a supportive housing apartment with services, and it works to get people off the street and keep them stably housed 70 to 90% of the time. You need a real well managed and coordinated system, but that's the heart of it. And then my housing plan involves building 500,000 units over the next 10 years,
wow.
focusing on genuinely affordable homes. One fun part is the city owns 12 golf courses at 2,500 acres. 8 is enough. We can take
Yes.
4 of them and build great new neighborhoods with 50,000 affordable homes for working families like teachers to be
Yeah.
able to afford to own or rent in great new neighborhoods. I mentioned that Homes for City Workers program. And again, my housing plan, that end street homelessness plan, and my education plan are all at landerfornyc.com.
LanderforNYC.com. And where can everyone follow you on social media
Oh, yeah.
to catch up with
So
you?
at Brad
Yeah.
Lander,
Just
basically on all the
search for
platforms.
Brad Lander. He's
Yeah, yeah.
everywhere.
So on this platform, on Instagram, you'll see mostly my daughter because she is a rock star. So look at her videos, look at mine. Come out on June 24th, and let's win a safer, more affordable, a better run city that loves its public schools and make sure every kid has a great one, and that supports the educators who are making that happen.
Thank you so much for your time. I know you're so busy. I feel like you're everywhere. Everywhere I look, you're there. So thank you for
I,
spending this time with us.
Hopefully,
Yeah.
folks have seen my TV ad where I'm crushing a
Yes.
Tesla. That is me driving the forklift, and we really did crush a Tesla in that ad.
That's real.
Uh, that's
Wow.
real. Yeah, in Southeast Queens, no AI was used.
That's
And
great.
yeah, hopefully you'll see me in your neighborhood, at your subway stop, at your kid's public school over the next 6 weeks.
And they said hi, and someone in the chat said, "Are you offering any pickups?" And you can talk about them that with them later. They said, like, if you're at the school, can you pick up their kid? Probably. You never know.
Sure, why not?
As mayor, you will. I'm
Yeah.
making promises for you.
Well, as mayor,
Yeah,
we're going to have universal after school, so you'll be able to
exactly.
leave your kid there until 6 and then get them when you get off work.
That is even better.
Yeah, here,
Thanks
here.
so much for your time.
This
I'm
was
going to
great.
post
I
this.
really appreciate it.
Yeah. I'll see you
Thank you.
soon, hopefully.
Dynamite.